16 months after the breakup, my ex's mother called. I almost didn't answer. She asked about work, then set the phone down without hanging up. And I heard her say, "He's still the one she should have chosen." The words landed like a stone in still water. I realized the one person whose opinion I'd never asked for had just given me back something I didn't know I'd lost. My ex, her daughter, had wanted someone louder, more ambitious, a man she believed she deserved. I was the quiet steadiness she eventually called boring and left behind. For 16 months I accepted that version. I assumed her family politely tolerated my memory. Maureen's unguarded words just proved everything I believed was wrong. And I had to ask myself, if I was the one she should have chosen, why didn't she? The answer begins 2 years before that phone call, with a woman named Rachel. She was sharp, ambitious, the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately recalibrated the energy. I met her at a mutual friend's housewarming. She was wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my rent, and she spent the first 10 minutes dismantling someone's argument about local politics with surgical precision. I was drawn to her fire. For a quiet man, fire can feel like warmth you didn't know you needed. We dated fast. Within 6 months, she'd introduced me to her parents. Her father was reserved, the kind of man who measured a person by their career trajectory. Her mother, Maureen, was different. She would ask me questions that had nothing to do with my job title, whether I was reading anything good, whether my apartment got enough morning light. She remembered that I liked tea instead of coffee, and she never made me feel like I was being auditioned. At holidays, while Rachel chased conversations with the most successful people in the room, Maureen and I would end up in the kitchen washing dishes, talking about nothing important. That was the thing. With Maureen, unimportant things felt seen. Rachel, though, started dropping comments about my ambition around the 1 year mark. She would say things like, "You're so steady," and the word sounded less like a compliment each time. She wanted someone who would match her fire, someone who would chase bigger titles, louder successes, more impressive dinner party anecdotes. I was content managing a small logistics team, reading books in the evening, living a life that felt full to me but small to her. Eventually, she told me, almost gently, that she thought she'd outgrown us. "I need someone who challenges me," she said, as if I hadn't challenged her to be kinder, to slow down, to notice the quiet things. But she didn't see those as challenges. She saw them as settling. The breakup was clean and devastating. No scandal, no betrayal, just the slow erosion of being loved for who you might become instead of who you are. I disappeared from their family orbit. No dramatic goodbye, no final conversation with Maureen. I just stopped being there. I assumed that was what everyone wanted. For 16 months, I rebuilt my life around the silence. Dating apps, work projects, a new apartment with better morning light. I thought about Rachel less and less, but I never quite stopped thinking about Maureen's kitchen conversations and whether any of that had been real. Had she actually enjoyed my company, or was she just being polite? That question sat unanswered in the back of my mind until a quiet Tuesday evening. I was sitting in my dim kitchen, finishing a book I'd already read before, when my phone buzzed against the countertop. The screen showed a name that made my stomach tight: Maureen. I hadn't seen that name on my phone in a year and a half. I stared at the caller ID, my thumb hovering. All the old assumptions came rushing back. She probably wanted to ask why I'd stopped coming around, or maybe Rachel had sent her. I almost let it ring out. I almost didn't answer. I answered on the fourth ring. Maureen's voice came through, warm and slightly hesitant, like she wasn't sure she had the right to call. She asked about work, my apartment, whether I was eating enough. It was small talk wrapped in genuine concern, and I found myself sinking into the familiarity of it before I could stop myself. She didn't mention Rachel directly, not once, but I could hear the careful navigation between every sentence. She asked if I was seeing anyone. I said no, not seriously. There was a pause long enough to feel intentional, then she said, "I'd better go," and that was when I heard it. The clatter of the phone being set down on a hard surface, not hung up, just set down, still live. I sat there in my dim kitchen, the line open, and was about to disconnect when I heard her voice again, softer this time, almost to herself. "He's still the one she should have chosen." Those 8 words stopped my breath. I didn't move. The silence on the other end stretched, and I held my phone against my ear like it was the only solid thing in the room. For 16 months, I had accepted a version of events where I was the placeholder, the man Rachel outgrew, the quiet chapter before her real life began. And now her mother, the one person who had seen us from the inside, had just collapsed that entire narrative with a single unguarded sentence. It wasn't just that she thought I was decent. It was the word still. That meant she had thought it all along, before the breakup, during, after. The quiet conversations in the kitchen, the thoughtful questions, the way she never pushed me to be something louder, none of it had been politeness. She had been rooting for me the whole time. My mind started racing backward. I thought about that Thanksgiving dinner where Rachel corrected me in front of everyone for using the wrong fork, and Maureen's eyes had flickered with something I couldn't name. I thought about the long weekend at their lake house when Rachel spent the whole Saturday on work calls, and Maureen and I took a walk through the pines. She had asked me what kind of life I actually wanted, not the one I was supposed to want. I told her I wanted a life that felt full in ordinary moments. She nodded slowly and said, "Some people never figure that out." I hadn't understood the weight behind those words until now. Maureen hadn't just been making conversation. She had been trying to tell me something. Maybe she had even tried to tell Rachel. I stayed frozen with the phone pressed to my head, the line still open. I could hear faint movement, the shuffle of a chair, the clink of a cup. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. In the background, another voice. Rachel's voice, not angry, not loud, just a quiet, strained, "Mom, please don't start this again." Maureen's reply was barely audible, but I caught it. "I'm not starting anything. I'm just saying the truth you keep pretending doesn't exist." Then the call clicked off. Just dead silence. I stared at my phone, my chest tight, my hands trembling. They were having this conversation right now in the same house, minutes after Maureen had called me. Rachel was there. She'd heard her mother call me. She'd heard her mother set the phone down and say the words she'd been avoiding for a year and a half. And I realized in that moment that my quiet breakup had never really been quiet at all. It had been a fracture line running through that family, and I had been completely unaware that Maureen had been fighting for me even after I was gone. The line went dead, but the echo of those words stayed alive in my kitchen for 10 straight minutes. I sat there, phone still in my hand, the weight of what I had just overheard settling into my chest like cold water. Maureen hadn't just been checking on me. She had reopened a door I didn't know was still there. I replayed it over and over. "He's still the one she should have chosen." Then Rachel's voice, strained and defensive. "Mom, please don't start this again." And Maureen's quiet defiance. "I'm not starting anything. I'm just saying the truth you keep pretending doesn't exist." This wasn't a one-time slip. This was a fault line that had been running through their family for 16 months, and I had been living on the other side of it without any idea. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Maureen's tone, not angry, just tired, tired of pretending. And I kept asking myself the question I had buried the day Rachel walked away: had she ever truly seen me at all? Because if her mother had seen something worth fighting for, why hadn't she? On the third night, my phone buzzed again. Maureen. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering a second time. But this time I knew I couldn't let it ring out. I answered before the third vibration. "Adam," she said, and her voice was different now, calmer, more deliberate. "I know you heard. I didn't pretend. Maureen, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize, please. I should be the one apologizing for putting you in this position. But I'm not sorry for what I said." She paused. "I've been saying it since the day she let you go." That was the moment the ground beneath me shifted, because now it wasn't just one overheard sentence. It was a campaign. A quiet internal war waged by a mother against her own daughter's choices, and I had been the silent subject of it all along. I asked her why she never reached out before. She told me she'd tried twice in the first 3 months after the breakup. Once by text, a simple "thinking of you" that she deleted before sending. Once by phone, she'd called and hung up before it connected. She didn't want to undermine Rachel's decision openly, but she couldn't accept it either. Then she told me something I wasn't prepared for. Rachel had started seeing someone else 4 months after the breakup. A corporate lawyer named Derek. He was loud, ambitious, exactly the type Rachel had described wanting. And according to Maureen, he was also dismissive, self-absorbed, and completely indifferent to the things Rachel used to claim didn't matter. Maureen had watched her daughter get exactly what she thought she wanted, and it was breaking her heart. Worst part, Maureen said, her voice catching, is that I think she knows. I think she knew within the first month, but admitting it would mean admitting I was right, and Rachel has never been able to do that. I sat in the dark, the phone pressed against my ear, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just sadness. For Rachel, for Maureen, for the time none of us could get back. Then Maureen took a breath and said something that turned everything upside down again. Adam, I need you to know something. Before she ended things with you, I told Rachel I thought she was making a mistake. She didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after that, and when she finally did, she told me you were too good for her. Those were her exact words, not that you were too quiet or too steady or not ambitious enough. She said you were too good for her, and that terrified her. The words hit me like a physical force. For a year and a half, I had carried the narrative Rachel gave me. I wasn't enough. I wasn't the right fit. I was the placeholder. But now I was hearing that she had never believed that at all. She had been afraid of being seen by someone who actually paid attention, afraid of being loved by someone who wouldn't leave. I asked Maureen why she was telling me this now. Her answer came without hesitation. Because she's moving in with Derek next month. And I refuse to watch her make the same mistake permanent without saying the truth to the one person who can still do something about it. The implication landed like a dropped weight. Maureen wasn't just venting, she was recruiting me. I told her I didn't know what she expected me to do. Rachel had a new life. I had spent 16 months rebuilding mine. Whatever window had existed between us was sealed. Maybe, Maureen said, but you answered my call, and you stayed on the line. That tells me something. Before I could respond, there was a sound in the background on her end, a door opening, a voice, Rachel's voice, sharp and immediate. Mom, who are you talking to? Maureen didn't answer right away. Then with the calm of someone who had made a decision, she said, I'm talking to Adam. He deserves to know the truth. You're too scared to tell him yourself. The line went quiet. I heard Rachel's breath catch. And then after a long pause, her voice came through, unsteady and close to the receiver. Adam, are you still there? I held the phone tighter. I could hear Rachel breathing on the other end, waiting for an answer, so I gave her one. I'm still here. The silence that followed was the kind that rearranges everything you thought you knew. Rachel had always been the one who controlled conversations, who dictated the pace and the terms. But now she was the one scrambling, and we both knew it. I didn't know she was going to call you, Rachel said finally, her voice stripped of the confidence I remembered. I didn't know she'd say that. But you're not surprised she did. Another pause, then quieter. No, I'm not. I stood up from my kitchen chair and walked to the window, looking out at the empty street. For 16 months I had replayed the breakup in my head, always from the same angle. I was the one who wasn't enough. But now I was hearing the other side of it, the side Rachel had never let me see. She told me the truth in fragments, like she was handing over pieces of glass she'd been holding too long. She said she started therapy 6 months after we ended. She said her therapist asked her to describe the healthiest relationship she'd ever had, and she described us without realizing it. She said Derek was everything she thought she wanted on paper: successful, aggressive, always chasing the next thing, and being with him felt like running a race she couldn't win. I told myself you were boring, she said, because boring was easier than safe. And safe was terrifying because if I let myself feel safe with you, I'd have to confront the fact that I didn't think I deserved to feel safe at all. I listened without interrupting. Not because I was trying to be generous, because I needed to hear it. The narrative I'd carried for a year and a half was finally being rewritten, not by Rachel's mother, but by Rachel herself. I heard what my mom said, she continued. I've heard her say it every time we argue about you, and every time I've told her to stop. But tonight, when I heard her say it to you directly, I realized something. I wasn't angry because she was wrong. I was angry because she was right, and I'd spent 16 months trying to prove otherwise. I let the words settle. Then I asked the question I'd been carrying since the hook opened this whole story. So why didn't you choose me? Rachel's voice broke just slightly. Because choosing you would have meant choosing myself, and I didn't know how to do that yet. That was the answer I didn't know I needed. Not an apology wrapped in excuses, not a plea for a second chance, just an honest admission that the failure had never been mine to own. The quiet